The diner was nearly empty as Emma wiped down the counter, her shoulders aching from the double shift. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the worn linoleum floor. She glanced at her tip jar, barely enough for bus fare, let alone the rent due in 2 days. Her mother's medical bills still sat in a stack by her bedside table, a constant reminder of what she'd lost. 5 years since her mother's stroke, and the world still felt hollow without her gentle presence. Emma ran her finger over the small locket hidden beneath her uniform, the only valuable thing she owned, containing a faded picture of her mother's smile. The bell above the door jangled, pulling her from her thoughts. A man walked in, his presence immediately commanding the room. His tailored suit probably cost more than 6 months of her rent, his leather shoes gleaming under the diner's cheap lighting. He moved with the confidence of someone who had never worried about a bill in his life. "Coffee, black," he said without looking up from his phone, his voice carrying the crisp authority of someone used to giving orders. Emma nodded, though he wasn't watching, and poured the coffee into the cleanest mug they had. "Anything else, sir?" she asked, setting the mug down carefully. He finally looked up, his piercing blue eyes briefly meeting hers before dismissing her just as quickly. "Just the check." Emma scribbled out the bill and placed it on the counter. The man reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a sleek leather wallet. As he opened it, something slipped, and the wallet fell open wider than intended. That's when she saw it. A photograph, worn at the edges but unmistakable. Emma's heart stopped, the world around her suddenly muffled, as if underwater. The familiar smile, the eyes that had looked at her with love every day of her childhood. Her mother's face, staring back at her from this stranger's wallet. Her hands began to tremble, coffee sloshing over the side of the pot she was still holding. With a shaking breath, she set it down, her eyes never leaving the photograph. "Sir," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the quiet hum of the diner. "Why is my mother's picture in your wallet?" The man's movements froze, his fingers still holding a crisp $100 bill. For a split second, something flashed across his face. Surprise, perhaps recognition, before his expression hardened into an unreadable mask. The man's face betrayed nothing as he smoothly closed his wallet, tucking it back into his jacket. His movements were deliberate, controlled, the actions of someone accustomed to hiding emotions. "You must be mistaken," he said, his voice cool and dismissive. He placed the $100 bill on the counter, far more than his coffee cost. "Keep the change." Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. That photograph, she would recognize it anywhere. It was from her mother's small collection of treasured memories, kept in an old wooden box beneath her bed. Emma had spent countless nights after her mother's passing going through those photos, tracing her fingers over her mother's face, trying to memorize every line, every smile. "I'm not mistaken," Emma insisted, her voice stronger now. "That's my mother, Sarah Jenkins." She watched his face carefully, searching for any reaction to the name. Something flickered in his eyes, so brief she might have imagined it, before his expression returned to that impenetrable mask. "I have no idea what you're talking about," he said, adjusting his expensive cufflinks. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. Panic surged through Emma. She couldn't let him leave, not with her mother's photo, not with the answer she suddenly desperately needed. She untied her apron with trembling fingers and tossed it on the counter. "Greg, I need 5 minutes," she called to the cook, who gave her a confused nod. She rushed after the man, pushing through the door into the cool night air. The street was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the clicking of the man's expensive shoes against the pavement. He was already approaching a sleek black car, its engine purring softly as a driver stood ready to open the door. "Wait," Emma called, her voice echoing in the empty street. "Please, just tell me how you knew my mother." The man paused, his hand on the car door. For a moment, Emma thought he might answer. Instead, he turned slightly, his gaze traveling over her face with a calculating intensity that sent a chill down her spine. "I don't owe you an explanation," he said, his voice cold and final. Before she could respond, he slid into the car, and the driver shut the door behind him. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, its taillights disappearing into the night. Emma stood frozen on the sidewalk, her breath forming small clouds in the cold air. The encounter felt surreal, like something from a dream, but the image of her mother's photograph remained burned into her mind. That night, sleep eluded her. She tossed and turned in her small apartment, her mind racing with questions. Her mother had been a nurse at a community clinic, a woman of modest means and simple pleasures. How could she possibly be connected to a man who exuded wealth and power from every pore? Emma reached for her phone, the screen's glow illuminating her determined face as she typed, "Billionaire CEO's city." It didn't take long to find him. Alexander Pierce, real estate mogul, worth billions. His company photo showed the same cold blue eyes that had dismissed her hours earlier. As dawn broke, Emma made her decision. She wasn't going to let this go. Whatever connection existed between her mother and Alexander Pierce, she deserved to know the truth. She would find answers, no matter what it took. The Pierce Tower dominated the skyline, a gleaming monument of glass and steel that seemed to touch the clouds. Emma stood at its base, feeling smaller than she ever had before. The morning sun reflected off the building's surface, nearly blinding her as she looked up, counting at least 60 floors. Inside her pocket, her fingers closed around her mother's old keychain, a small silver heart with a tiny crack running through it. Emma had carried it everywhere since her mother's passing. For courage, she whispered to herself, a ritual she'd developed in the hardest moments of her life. The lobby bustled with purposeful activity. Men and women in tailored suits moved with brisk efficiency, their conversations a soft hum of business jargon and clipped phrases. Security guards stood at strategic points, their watchful eyes scanning everyone who entered. The marble floor gleamed so perfectly Emma could see her reflection, her worn jeans and simple blouse marking her as an outsider in this world of wealth and power. She approached the reception desk, where a woman with immaculate makeup and a sleek ponytail sat behind a curved counter of polished stone. "Good morning. Welcome to Pierce Enterprises," the receptionist said, her professional smile not quite reaching her eyes. "How may I assist you today?" Emma swallowed hard. "I need to see Alexander Pierce." The receptionist's smile didn't falter, but her eyes cooled noticeably. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but I'm afraid Mr. Pierce's schedule is completely full. He doesn't take unscheduled meetings." The woman's fingers tapped lightly against her keyboard. "Perhaps I can direct you to someone else who might help you." Emma leaned forward slightly. "It's important. It's personal. Personal matters are handled through Mr. Pierce's private office. I can give you a contact email if you'd like to submit a request." The woman's tone made it clear this was the end of the conversation. Emma stepped back from the desk, her mind racing. She scanned the lobby, noting the security turnstiles that required badge access. Employees swiped their cards and passed through with barely a glance from the guards. She needed a way past them. Near the coffee stand in the corner, a young man in a navy suit juggled his phone, a coffee cup, and a folder tucked under his arm. He looked distracted, his attention focused on whatever message he was typing. Emma watched as he approached the turnstiles, still engrossed in his phone. Without allowing herself time to reconsider, Emma moved quickly, falling in a step beside him just as he reached the security checkpoint. "Did you get that email about the Pierce proposal?" she asked confidently, as if they were mid-conversation. "He wants the revisions by noon." The man glanced up, momentarily confused. What proposal?" Emma gave an exasperated sigh. "The Henderson account. Pierce said he needed it first thing." Before he could fully process her words, they had reached the turnstiles. The man swiped his badge, and Emma smoothly stepped through alongside him, close enough that the system registered only one entry. "I think Johnson has those files," the man said uncertainly as they walked toward the elevators. "Thanks. I'll check with him," Emma replied with a professional nod, then veered away as if heading to a different destination. Her heart pounded as she slipped into an open elevator. She pressed the button for the top floor, assuming that's where she'd find the CEO's office. As the doors closed, she caught sight of the receptionist looking in her direction with narrowed eyes. The elevator rose swiftly, floor numbers lighting up in sequence. Emma's reflection in the polished doors showed a woman she barely recognized. Determined, fearless, perhaps even reckless. What would her mother think of what she was doing? The thought brought both pain and resolve. Her mother had always protected her, sheltered her from life's harshest truths. But now, Emma needed answers that only Alexander Pierce could provide. When the elevator doors opened on the 60th floor, she stepped into a world of understated luxury. The reception area featured soft lighting, abstract art on the walls, and comfortable seating arranged around low tables. A woman behind a curved desk looked up, her expression shifting from professional welcome to confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked, already reaching for her phone. Before Emma could answer, a tall man in a dark suit approached, his expression stern. "Excuse me, miss. This is a restricted floor. Do you have an appointment with Mr. Pierce?" Emma straightened her shoulders, channeling every ounce of confidence she could muster. "No, but I need to see him. It's about my mother." The man's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted. "Mr. Pierce is in a meeting." "Then I'll wait," Emma said firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. The assistant studied her for a long moment, then exhaled. "Wait here." He turned and disappeared down a hallway. Emma stood in the center of the reception area, acutely aware of the curious glances from the staff. Minutes stretched endlessly, each second bringing a new wave of doubt. Had she made a terrible mistake? Would security come to escort her out? Then, a door opened at the far end of the room. Alexander Pierce himself emerged, his expression unreadable as his eyes found her. He didn't look surprised to see her. Instead, he looked resigned, as if he had been expecting this moment for years. He approached slowly, his hands in his pockets, his gaze never leaving her face. "You just don't give up, do you?" he said quietly. Emma met his stare, her mother's keychain clutched tightly in her palm. "Not when it comes to my mother." A long silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. Finally, Alexander nodded toward the open door behind him. "Come with me." Without waiting for her response, he turned and walked back toward his office. Emma hesitated only briefly before following him, crossing the threshold into a space that might finally hold the answer she sought. Alexander Pierce's office was a testament to power and wealth, yet possessed an unexpected warmth. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking panorama of the city below, making Emma momentarily dizzy as she realized how high they were. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled not just with business volumes, but also classics of literature and philosophy. A massive desk of polished walnut dominated the center of the room, its surface organized with military precision. Alexander walked to a sitting area by the windows, gesturing for Emma to take a seat in one of the leather chairs. She remained standing, her body tense with anticipation and uncertainty. "You went to considerable trouble to get here," he said, studying her with those penetrating blue eyes. There was something in his gaze she couldn't quite decipher, a mixture of wariness and something deeper, more complex. "You left me no choice," Emma replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "You have my mother's photograph and refused to explain why." Alexander exhaled slowly, as if weighing his next words carefully. He moved to his desk and leaned against it, creating distance between them. "What was your mother's name?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Sarah Jenkins." Emma watched his face for any reaction. Something flickered in his expression, a brief shadow of what might have been pain. "And she passed away 5 years ago." Emma's breath caught. "How did you know that?" Instead of answering, Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. With careful movements, he extracted the worn photograph she had glimpsed in the diner. He held it between his fingers, looking at it with an expression that seemed almost tender before turning it around for her to see. "This photograph," he said quietly, "I've carried it for 25 years. Emma stepped closer, her heart pounding as she looked at the image of her mother. Younger, radiant, her smile carefree in a way Emma had rarely witnessed. But now, seeing it clearly, she noticed something she hadn't before. The edge of the photograph was torn, as if someone had been standing beside her mother and had been removed from the picture. "It's incomplete," she said, pointing to the torn edge. "There was someone else in it." Alexander nodded slowly. "Yes." "Who?" Emma asked, though a strange feeling was beginning to form in the pit of her stomach. Alexander's gaze met hers directly. "Me." The word hung in the air between them, simple yet devastating in its implications. Emma felt the room tilt slightly, her mind struggling to process what he was saying. That doesn't make sense," she whispered, but even as she spoke, she found herself studying his features more carefully. The shape of his eyes, the line of his jaw. Was there something familiar there that she had never recognized before? "Your mother and I knew each other," Alexander said, his voice softer than before. "We were very close once." Emma shook her head, trying to clear the confusion. "She never mentioned you. Not once in my entire life." "She wouldn't have," he replied, a hint of bitterness creeping into his tone. "She had her reasons." "What reasons?" Emma demanded, her voice rising slightly. "If you were so important to her, why would she never tell me about you?" Alexander's jaw tightened. He walked to the window, staring out at the city below as if gathering his thoughts. When he turned back to her, his expression had changed. The corporate mask had slipped, revealing something raw underneath. "Because I hurt her," he said simply. "I made the worst mistake of my life, and she never forgave me for it." Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "What did you do to her?" Alexander reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a small, old envelope. He handed it to her without a word. Emma hesitated, then took it, her fingers brushing against his for the briefest moment. Inside was another photograph, this one complete. Her mother, young and beautiful, stood smiling broadly. Beside her, with his arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders, was a much younger Alexander Pierce. They looked happy, in love, their faces glowing with a joy Emma had rarely seen in her mother's expression. "I don't understand," Emma whispered, her voice breaking slightly as she stared at the evidence of a past she had never known existed. "Why didn't she tell me about you? Why didn't you ever come find us?" Alexander's expression darkened with what looked like genuine regret. "I made choices, Emma. Choices I've regretted every day since." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "I chose ambition over love. My family, my business, they demanded everything from me. Your mother wanted a simple life, a family. I thought I could have both, but when I was forced to choose..." His voice trailed off. "You chose this," Emma said, gesturing to the opulent office around them. "You chose wealth over her." "Over both of you," he corrected quietly. Emma froze, the implication of his words hitting her like a physical blow. "Both of us." Alexander's eyes never left hers as he spoke the words that would change everything. "Emma, I'm your father." The room seemed to spin around her. Emma grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself, her knuckles turning white with the effort. Memories flashed through her mind. All the time she had asked about her father, all the vague answers her mother had given. "He couldn't be with us," her mother had said. "It was complicated." "No," Emma said, shaking her head. "That's not possible." "It is," Alexander replied, his voice steady but filled with an emotion she couldn't name. "I've known from a moment I saw you at the diner. You have her eyes, her smile, but you have my stubbornness." A ghost of a smile touched his lips before fading. "I knew who you were immediately." "If that's true," Emma said, her voice trembling with anger now, "then why didn't you say something then? Why did you walk away?" Again, Alexander ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking older, more vulnerable. "Because I didn't know what to say." How do you tell someone you're the father who abandoned them? How do you ask for forgiveness for something unforgivable? Emma's emotions warred within her. Anger, confusion, a lifetime of questions suddenly finding potential answers. Why did she leave? Why did she never tell me about you? "To protect you," he said simply. "From me, from this world." He gestured around him. "Sarah wanted you to grow up valuing what truly matters. Not money, not power, but love and integrity. Things I lost sight of." Emma's throat tightened as tears threatened to spill. All these years of struggling, of watching her mother work double shifts to make ends meet, of scholarships that never came through, of dreams deferred because there wasn't enough money, while her father had been living in luxury. "You let us struggle," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You let her die, thinking you didn't care." Pain flashed across Alexander's face. "I tried to find her, both of you, years later. But she had disappeared, changed her name from Williams back to Jenkins. She didn't want to be found." He paused. "I respected her choice, even though it broke me." Emma stood in silence, trying to process everything she had just learned. The man before her, this stranger with his wealth and power, was her father. The missing piece of her life, the question that had haunted her childhood, stood before her asking for understanding. "Why now?" she finally asked. "Why are you telling me all this now?" Alexander stepped closer, his expression more open than she had seen it before. "Because I've lost too much time already. I lost your mother forever. I don't want to lose you too." Emma stood by the window, watching the city sprawl beneath them, thousands of lives unfolding, each with their own stories of love, loss, and secrets. The revelation hung in the air between them, too enormous to fully comprehend. Her entire understanding of her past had been rewritten in minutes. "You think it's that simple?" she finally said, turning to face Alexander. "That you can just tell me you're my father, and everything will be okay?" Alexander shook his head slowly. "No, nothing about this is simple. Do you have any idea what our lives were like?" Emma's voice trembled with emotion she could no longer contain. "Mom worked double shifts at the clinic. There were nights she came home so exhausted she could barely stand. I watched her skip meals so I could eat. I saw her cry when she thought I was asleep because she couldn't afford my college application fees." Each word seemed to land like a physical blow. Alexander's shoulders tensed, his expression tightening with pain. "Meanwhile, you were here," Emma continued, gesturing around the opulent office. "In your tower, with your billions. Did you ever once think about us? Did you ever wonder if we were okay?" "Every day," he said quietly. "Not a single day passed that I didn't think about your mother, about the child I knew existed somewhere in the world." Emma laughed bitterly. "Thinking isn't the same as doing something." "You're right." His admission surprised her. "I told myself I was respecting her wishes by staying away, that she had made her choice. But the truth is, I was a coward. It was easier to bury myself in work than to face what I had done." Emma walked to the desk, picking up the photograph of her mother and Alexander. They looked so young, so happy. A life that could have been. "She never stopped loving you," Emma said softly, surprising herself with the admission. "She never said it, but I could see it. Whenever I asked about my father, there was this look in her eyes, pain, but something else too, something that never quite went away." Alexander's breath caught audibly. He moved to a small cabinet in the corner of the office, unlocking it with a key from his pocket. From inside, he withdrew a small velvet box. "Your mother came to see me once about 7 years ago," he said, his voice low. "I had just completed this building. My face was in the business section of every newspaper. She saw it, and for whatever reason, she decided it was time we spoke." Emma's heart pounded. 2 years before she died? "She never told me." Alexander nodded. "She made me promise not to contact you. She said it was her story to tell when she was ready." He held out the velvet box. "She left this with me. She said I would know when it was time to give it to you." With trembling fingers, Emma took the box. It was heavier than she expected, worn at the edges as if it had been handled often. She opened it slowly. Inside lay a delicate silver necklace. The pendant was a small heart, and engraved on its surface were 3 simple words: "Forgive, love, begin." A sob escaped her before she could stop it. Her mother's handwriting. She recognized it immediately. The same flowing script that had signed her school permission slips, written little notes in her lunchboxes, pinned birthday cards year after year. "She knew she was sick," Alexander said softly. "She didn't tell me then, but later I found out her doctors had already given her the diagnosis. She knew she might not have time to tell you everything herself." Emma clutched the necklace, the metal warm against her palm. "Why didn't you find me after she died? You must have known." "I did," he admitted. "I attended her funeral at a distance. I saw you there, devastated, surrounded by our friends. What right did I have to approach you then? To add to your pain with my presence. He shook his head. I decided to wait to find the right moment. And that moment was when I happened to serve you coffee. Emma asked, unable to keep the edge from her voice. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Life rarely gives us perfect moments, Emma. When I walked into that diner, I had no idea you worked there. It was... He hesitated. Perhaps it was fate. Emma looked down at the necklace again, running her thumb over the engraved words. Forgive. Love. Begin. Her mother's final message to her, perhaps to both of them. I don't know if I can forgive you, she said honestly. 25 years of absence can't be erased in a day. I'm not asking for that, Alexander replied. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to know my daughter. A chance to try to make amends, though I know I never truly can. Emma was silent for a long moment, the weight of the choice before her settling on her shoulders. The easy path would be to walk away, to reject this man who had rejected them first. But her mother's words stared back at her from the silver pendant. Begin. I have a life, she finally said. It's not much by your standards, a small apartment, a job that barely pays the bills, community college classes I take when I can afford them. But it's mine. Alexander nodded, waiting. If this is going to work, whatever this is, you need to understand that I won't be bought. I won't be your charity case or your way to ease your guilt. I understand, he said softly. Emma took a deep breath. I want to know everything. About you and Mom. How you met. Why you really left. All of it. Alexander gestured to the sitting area by the window. It's a long story. I have time, Emma replied, moving toward the chairs. As she sat down, she slipped the necklace over her head, feeling its weight against her collarbone. It felt right there, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Alexander sat across from her, his posture more relaxed than she had seen it before. For the first time, she could see beyond the billionaire CEO to the man beneath. A man with regrets, with pain, with a lifetime of choices he couldn't undo. It began 26 years ago, he started, his voice taking on a warmth she hadn't heard before. I was just starting out, ambitious but broke. Your mother was working her way through nursing school. We met at a coffee shop where she was picking up extra shifts. As he spoke, Emma felt something shift within her. Not forgiveness, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. Outside the window, the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light across the city below. In its glow, Emma could almost imagine her mother watching them, her gentle smile encouraging this first tentative step toward healing. The road ahead would be long and undoubtedly difficult. There would be more pain, more questions, more moments of doubt. But as she listened to her father's voice telling the story of how he had loved her mother, Emma allowed herself to consider a future she had never imagined possible. One where the broken pieces of her past might somehow, someday, begin to form something whole.